On today's show,
It's sugar time.
the sweet sounds of spring. Up first, 3 generations drill up Minnesota's maple tradition. Then, this birdie call is a sure sign that winter is on its way out. Find out what makes Minnesota's red wing blackbirds so unique. And before all the ice disappears, one group celebrates a fish most anglers like to forget. Those stories and more coming up next.
Minnesota Bound. Brought to you by Minnesota's Select GMC dealers.
Hi everybody, Raven and I welcome you to the show. The days of March, bouncing between lions and lambs, right? Well, that does bring up a grand tradition in Minnesota, the making of maple syrup. And our first story is about some folks who have that tradition. Travis Frank has the story. Thanks, Raven.
It's time to celebrate. Spring has arrived and there's gold in the trees.
It's sugar time. It's sugar time. It sure feels fine.
Fine indeed. Clark Optimus celebrates spring with music and maple syrup.
That's good.
A school teacher by day and folk singer by night, has spent more than 20 years tapping his giant maple trees.
Basically, when we tap on a tree, you look at, this is a fairly young one, so we go 15 inches diameter, you can tap one tap. 24 inches, we figure you can put 2 taps in.
This year he's teaching a newcomer, his son Mason, which now makes 3 generations in this family business.
We used to do it this way when we started over 20 years ago by hand. Mason, you want to try it? You tap it, you drill it in 3 inches, 2-degree angle, it'll run by gravity, and then of course you put the tap in. See, this is the tail end of the run, but it's really, this one's really kicking in. And then we'd run it to a 5-gallon bucket.
Warm days draw sap up the tree.
It's bringing the sugar from the ground up to the leaves and to get nourishment.
Frost pushes it back down. 1 drip at a time, buckets fill.
Then the sap fills up, of course, sometimes 5 gallons, 10 gallons a day, depending on how it really kicks in. Oh yes, the mother lode. We color code these so we can see them in the winter. Okay, let's go to the next round.
150 trees and over 360 taps run day and night.
We're busy.
Back at the sugar house, Clark's father Ron stokes the fire.
We do it the old-fashioned way, and it's kind of a family thing that we do. It has to be good and hot.
219 degrees to be exact.
219, it is still maple syrup. It doesn't become crystallized sugar. You push it past 219, it becomes crystallized.
This is a good hot one. This is coming up pretty nice. Ooh, yeah. 216 there. Ooh. It's taking the moisture out of the syrup. It's taking the sugar, separating the sugar from the water. It's just a pure maple syrup. We don't add anything to it. It's just natural.
Batch after batch, Ron tries to keep up with the trees.
We boil it right down to what you see is what you get.
In the end, 30 gallons of sap boils down to only 1 gallon of maple syrup.
And then we go and collect and do the whole thing again. So, and then of course he finishes off in the shack. Bucket by bucket. And handmade all the way until basically we bottle it. Well, it's all handmade, I guess. So, yeah, it'll work.
We enjoy the woods. We enjoy the outdoors. It's kind of something physical. And we do get some rewards out of the maple syrup.
How is it?
Yeah, good.
So they collect every last drop, knowing soon it will all be over. The leaves will bud and sap will disappear. Then it will only be music. Until next year, when the gold starts flowing again.
We'll recipes from old, though they won't be sold.
Coming up, the story behind the blackbird with the colorful wing. And later, we'll go 75 feet straight up to show you life inside Minnesota Bound's Eagle Camp. That's coming up.
Minnesota Bound is brought to you by Minnesota's select GMC dealers, Ice Force, Connecticut, and by Star Bank.
Welcome back. Another sign of spring in Minnesota is, of course, the return of red-winged blackbirds. You can hear their melodic call in the marshes all around Minnesota. But did you know that call is also part of a love story, one that doesn't always have a happy ending?
This is Minnesota's Song of Spring, sung by the male red-winged blackbird, and a melody we who live in the land of snow and ice are so happy to hear.
One of the first migrants back to the wetlands and marshes in Minnesota. So when you hear that conklily, it's a good thing. You know, you're excited because spring's here, and right behind it's the warm weather and other migratory birds. They prefer wetland habitat. So if you're in a wetland habitat, it's kind of a medium-sized member of the blackbird family, and the males have shoulder patches. They're kind of a scarlet red color lined with yellow, and they have the ability to almost completely cover them up, and they also can kind of really display them and open up their shoulders when they call.
Display, call, swing on the cattails like a happy lark. Mother Nature at peace. Is that what's happening here at Richfield's Wood Lake Nature Center? Not exactly. This is the Red Wings version of the mating game.
They're busy birds. Red-winged blackbirds are very polygamous. As males set up and establish a territory, when the females come back, they'll try to lure them into their territory. So that's the whole point of coming back early. They set up this territory, and when the females come back, they're kind of like, look at the area I've set up, and they'll draw the females in. So the females will be back a few weeks behind the males, and they stay behind, and they're feeding on insects places south of here, where they'll have a lot more insects this time of year. And it increases their overall fitness. So they're gonna increase the amounts of calcium and protein in their bodies. So then when they do migrate north and they mate with the males, they'll be at a high fitness level to lay their eggs.
In the meantime, other birds in the marsh are, well, dating, kinda. But not the male redwing. He sings and waits, and struts his feathered tucks for, well, nothing. Then one day, weeks later, mating game on.
So the female red-winged blackbird looks nothing like the male. You know, if you're in a wetland habitat and you see something that looks like a larger sparrow that is kind of moving in and out of the cattails, it's probably a female red-winged blackbird. She looks like a large sparrow, and she has kind of a white eye stripe above her eye. But as soon as the female comes back, they will often mate with the male, and they'll set up a nest, and it's usually kind of a 4-part system. It's 4 layers, and they're really, really good nest builders. What they look for is sturdy aquatic vegetation, and the female does a really good job of weaving building materials from like the most sturdy to the least sturdy as it moves in. And the inside of their nest is usually lined with really soft grass for the eggs. She'll lay a clutch of usually 2 to 4 eggs, and it takes just under 2 weeks for them to hatch.
Oh, by the way, you should know, the male redwing is kind of a cattail playboy.
They can have up to 15 females per territory.
It's no wonder his song keeps blowing in the wind.
Got him. Up next, we get wild for Pout. Find out why so many anglers like to ignore this native fish.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Borderview Lodge.
Now, before the winter fishing season fades away, it's time to remember there's a fish in Minnesota that most folks deplore, but others adore. Travis Frank has the story.
On a cold February day, back in 1979, anglers gathered on the ice of Leech Lake to celebrate a fish with many names. That day, the Eel Pout Festival was born. For 3 days every winter, Eel Pout takes center stage. Then the roar settles, ice houses disappear, and Eel Pout become an afterthought once again. Except here.
Eel Pout.
Burbot.
Mariah.
Ling.
Lawyer.
Lingcod.
Loda Loda.
You know your pout well.
I prefer burbot.
Whatever they call it, Jason Rylander has become their #1 fan. His friends call him the bearded pout whisperer, and he's got the photos to prove it.
What do you call this guy?
That is the Pout Angel.
This is a pout delicacy right here. Stinky garlic jig head with shiners covered in fur, basically.
Right.
I don't know how else to describe it, but ugh.
I think they look super neat. They're tigers. They look like tigers to me. They're green, the whites, the yellows. I want a camouflage pattern suit made of burbot. You fish them at night. You know, they're creepy looking, I think, to a lot of people. They're an eel, snake-like, and scared of them.
As the sun goes down, the hunt for pout
Dinner time.
begins. Jason's handmade pout angel calls them in.
Isn't technology sweet? Look at that. Here he is. He just came out of nowhere. Okay, does he got it?
They come in hot.
Got him.
Isn't that cool? Don't you want a camouflage jacket like that for duck hunting?
I think so. This is the part that give this thing a bad name right there.
It's that tail that gives them a bad rap.
Because they wrap around your arm. That's the classic, and I can honestly say I've maybe had 2 burbot wrap around my arm.
Pout. Back you go, little man.
On there too.
I know.
Awesome.
One just swam to the camera. You are dialed in over there. Is he tugging good?
For me, it's definitely the tug. The fight is phenomenal.
Nice.
Who doesn't like reeling in 10-pound fish? You've got the single barbell, and that's what they're using to pick up scent. And they don't have any teeth, like a bass. You know, that big belly, and then that eel-like tail.
A freshwater member of the cod family, eel pout need deep, cold water to survive.
They get more active the colder they get.
Late winter nights trigger them to move shallow, where they school up to spawn.
I typically will start targeting them in mid-February. You know, they spawn under the ice, roughly mid-March.
Look at that thing go.
That's why I love it.
Jason. Look at that. Oh my goodness.
For decades, eel pout were tossed onto frozen ice, considered a rough fish, left for waste.
Got him.
But not here. In this house, they've become Minnesota's top winter prize.
Lobster boil, 7-Up's easy.
Freshly caught, freshly served.
Just a pout perfect.
More buns.
More fun.
Still ahead, we go high-tech to get a bird's eye view of the Minnesota-bound bald eagles.
Minnesota Bound, brought to you by Northland Tracker Boating Centers, Evinrude, the official outboard motor of Minnesota Bound, and by Totem Resorts.
Okay, time for one more sign of spring, and that is the Minnesota-bound Eagle Cam, which is up and running. The nest is occupied, there's an egg or more, and who knows what will happen next. Just watch.
In 1782, when Congress chose the bald eagle as America's national emblem, who would guess that more than 2 centuries later, we'd be addicted to watching real eagles live on a computer screen? Since the Minnesota-bound live Eagle Cam hit the internet 5 years ago, upwards of 5 million folks a season have peeked into the life and times of eagles raising their eaglets in a nest of sticks high atop a tree near Hutchinson, Minnesota. Call it nature raw. The camera's bird's eye view of the nest sometimes show what's on the menu, fishy fish or furry critters. Eventually, eggs hatch and baby eagles then occupy their stick home, looking oh so fragile and helpless. Speaking of helpless, high drama took place during the nesting season of 2012 when one eaglet fell out of the nest and perished, while a second suffered a leg injury. Should we let nature take its course? Viewers who had named the young bird Harmon said no. So, to the rescue came a crew from the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota.
Hey buddy, what you got there? You got a whole mess of stuff here. Okay, my friend. Yeah, I know that was a rough ride, but it's okay. It's okay. Hopefully a couple of days at the spa and some good food and clean them up to get the maggots off, we will have a kid that looks altogether different. Comfy spot.
Quickly, the Raptor crew fixed the wing and returned Harmon to the nest. But then the question was, would the parents return? After 24 hours and no sign of Mom and Pop Eagle, all hope was fading. When the parents returned and reunited with their lone surviving young. And they lived happily ever after. But the story doesn't end there, because Minnesota Bound will again bring you the life and times of a bald eagle family, thanks to Mark Wegscheid from Broadband Corporation.
This is a mount we made that the camera will go in. We haven't had this before. So we're gonna load all this up into the boom and head up.
Head up to an eagle's nest to mount, shall we say, a spy camera on the feathered occupants when they return for the spring nesting season. To set up a webcam is rather high-tech stuff.
There's a solar panel and then a little box on top. That's a wireless radio.
Okay, it's time to head up to the top floor.
What we'll do is we have the old equipment that we need to take down, which is a mic box and the old camera. When we take those down, we'll mount the new camera up on the tree. He'll be logged in on the bottom and we'll aim it in. And then when we're all done with that, we're gonna take the log that we made as a housing for the camera, and we'll mount that over the top.
So what lies ahead for the 2015 year of the Minnesota Bound Eagle Cam? Only nature knows. To find out, simply click on mnbound.com. What the Eagles don't know is millions of us, once again, will be watching nature's own Eagle soap opera.
So many things happening in springtime, huh? Well, that about does it for us. Remember, introduce a kid to the great outdoors. I'm Ron Sherrod, my Auntie, co-star here. Well, in fact, she's the star of the show, Raven. Are you going to settle down?
Transportation provided by Premier Transportation. Call 1-800-899-7433. To get more Minnesota Bound, including full episodes, go to mnbound.com. And to follow our latest adventures, like us on Facebook.